You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and TJ. The lovely and talented Teresa Jean, vocalist of the local rock band The Nearly Deads, is joining us today as well. TJ, welcome to the show and thanks for taking some time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You may remember last month we spoke to TJ's bandmate Steven on our Jaws episode. So naturally, we'll probably eventually just go through the whole band and get everybody on the show, have a good time. So, TJ, we asked you to pick a movie. You went with 1991 Silence of the Lambs. Terrible, awful movie. No one likes it.
No one's heard of
it. I'm just joking. All right, so let's dive in. So go ahead, go grab your bottle of Chianti, rub some lotion on your skin, and let's begin.
Yeah, so
sorry.
Am I starting or you start?
I should have got Chianti. I'm rosé tonight. Sorry.
Oh, that's better. Well, apparently there was a whole controversy over him mispronouncing. It's Chianti, right? Is the correct pronunciation?
Mm.
So that apparently kind of made him not the erudite British professor that he was pretending to be, and his kind of, lower class English roots kind of come out on that, and nobody caught him. Apparently that was the whole thing. Anyway, I watched Silence of the Hams because I thought that's what we were watching this week. I had a very different experience with Dom DeLuise. And I believe there's a 3-boobed woman in that film, if I remember correctly. Bad joke, but watch that.
Is that a real movie?
Oh, that's a real movie. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
God.
parody.
I have to watch it now.
Sometime in the 90s, yeah, when Dom DeLuise was still alive and making terrible direct-to-video films, and his post-height of his, Mel Brooks days and whatnot. Yeah, it was I can say that I watched it, and it was a film. It used to be at my local video store. Anyway, that's not the movie we're talking about. We're talking about Silence of the Lambs, who there is a little controversy around. Is it a horror film? Is it not a horror film? Is it a psychological thriller? Is a psychological thriller really a horror film? Where's the boundaries? Where's the lines? Because Anthony Hopkins as the Hannibal Lecter, which this wasn't the first film that portrayed Hannibal Lecter. The great Michael Mann 1986 Manhunter film was the first depiction of Hannibal Lecter. Also a really good actor, also a really good British actor whose name escapes me at the moment, but I think he's the voice of one of the big car commercials now.
Brian Cox.
That's right. Yeah, and he does a lot of voiceover work now too. But he was the first Hannibal Lecter, but this is the Hannibal Lecter that is iconic that most people know. And he was voted kind of at the close of the 90s. AFI did, they do a lot of their best films, best different performances list. He was voted as the greatest villain of all time, playing Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. And it is famously the only movie that is considered a horror film by the majority to win the Best Picture Oscar. Jonathan Demme. Jonathan Demme got his start with making Roger Corman films back in the day, and Roger Corman gets a nice cameo in here as the FBI director in a little one scene shot where he's talking on the phone near the end. I have watched this film a whole bunch of times over the years, but it's probably been at least 10 years since I've seen it. I've owned it probably about 5 different times. I used to have what used to be the definitive version. The Criterion Collection actually put out a DVD of this years ago that before Blu-ray was like the best way to watch it. But it's a really good psychological film. It's more of a slow burn than what I remember it being, because it moves so smoothly. It doesn't feel like a 2-hour film. So I guess that's a good compliment to it. But, I would still I would fall in the category of saying this is more psychological thriller than horror. And I know they share a lot of DNA. But I consider this more of a police procedural, psychological serial killer thriller, of which, you know, that's basically its own genre now, especially since in the post Silence of the Lambs film, we've had so many TV series kind of become like, you know, the CSIs of the world and everything that have kind of popularized this kind of format, which this really follows the beats of and really lays the groundwork for a lot of those shows to come out. I love Jodie Foster. She's one of the great actresses that we have that grew up, you know, before my parents' generation's eyes. Little Girl That Lives Down the Lane was one in the 70s that I really remember. And then, of course, the iconic and Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro. This was one of the first films that people, I think, really got introduced to the adult Jodie Foster with this film. And when I think of Jodie Foster, I think of her being Clarice with that, you know, Southern accent that she's affecting. And, you know, I think when they tried to serialize this version of Hannibal Lecter with the newer series, making Hannibal, you know, a decade later with Julianne Moore, another great Oscar-winning actress, but she couldn't fill the shoes, in my opinion, of Jodie Foster in this role because it just becomes so iconic. There's no way to replace that role, which is one of the reasons I like Red Dragon, because I don't think she's in the Red Dragon movie. That's because that's the remake of Manhunter and the book series that they are basing that same, you know, material on. But I like the film. The moss creeped me out. I mean, the actual villain is, you know, Buffalo Bill is iconic. That's probably become one of the biggest internet memes of the dance and the, you know, the weirdness. Lloyd Kaufman parodied it in a recent one of his films. Guy that we had on, John Brennan, got to kind of parody the music to that scene and everything. And, you know, there's so many iconic things around it, like that just make it sit in your mind. I think it's interesting that the thing that people think of when they think of Hannibal Lecter and what really got popular that kind of made him in the conversation with the Freddys and the Jasons is that one scene where he's got the, you know, the face mask over his mouth and he's strapped to the upright gurney basically, and they're just like hauling him out like a, you know, like a package to get delivered. Is, I mean, the thing I like about his performance the most is the fact that he doesn't blink. And that was an intentional choice he made as an actor to not blink in the whole film. There's one scene early on when he's first in the first prison cell, first talking with Jodie, where he almost half blinks. His bottom eyelid twitches just a little bit. And I'm like, is he gonna blink? Nope, he caught it. He didn't do it. So good job, Anthony Hopkins. That's why you're an Oscar-winning actor, because you cannot blink and talk to
that whole scene where you first see him too. Like that's part of my notes I took. Is like when you first meet him, he's so creepy looking. Like he's just standing there still, like hello, Clarice. Like he's just still, and like I didn't even notice the non-blinking, but that just adds to it because he's just perfectly straight. His legs are together and everything. I think his hands are behind his back. Like you meet him, you're like, even though he's well versed and he looks normal, you as soon as you see him, you're like, there's something with that guy that's not quite clicking.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when we talked about The Shining, like you're taken to that hotel, the opening sequence, you know, as it's looking over the water and everything, you're there with them. And that's the same thing this movie does, is like, here he is, you're in for it now. And like, you don't realize you're really jumping into that, but it's in the back of your mind, like something's off about this.
Yeah, it's kind of the uncanny valley effect that people describe when you see something that's like AI generated or something, and you know it don't quite look real. Hannibal Lecter in this film kind of doesn't quite look real, and so many iconic scenes. The other scene that I always think of when I think of him is when she comes back. One of the last times she comes back to the regular jail cell before they move him to Memphis, I believe, is he starts out in the shadow, and then he just gradually leans in out of the shadows and has this glare, and it's just like he's like a shark. I think I've heard him described as like he is the human shark, but with like a genius IQ that happens to also eat people and serve them for dinner. It's horrifying when you tie all those pieces together. But yeah, it was nice revisiting this film. First time probably a decade or more that I've done it. I've probably seen this film a dozen or more times. Famously, in my hometown, my former high school psychology teacher, I believe, showed us this film totally unedited in class when I was like a sophomore in high school, and that was badass and awesome. He also showed us Stir of Echoes, which was great because
They're also not working there anymore.
That's
They're
true.
also unemployed.
That's true. But actually, he teaches photography at Clemson University now. He got an upgrade, so good for him. But I'll give it to our guest, TJ. Tell us why you chose this film and why it's special to you.
Yeah, thank you for all of that history. What was the original Hannibal Lecter? You said Manhunter?
Manhunter is a Michael Mann directed film. He's the guy that directed Heat with Al Pacino and Val Kilmer and a lot of great films over the years.
I wasn't even really aware of that, so thank you for educating me on that. I am a huge Red Dragon fan as well.
It's the same story. And Ted Levine plays the serial killer in that Ralph Fiennes plays in Red Dragon.
Yeah, and he does a great job. So
not Ted Levine. Is it Ted Levine? No, Ted Levine's the guy in Silence of the Lambs. He's
that Buffalo
guy?
Bill.
Yeah, he's Buffalo Bill. Oh, now you're making me wonder. It is a famous Tom Noonan.
Noonan's a man.
The guy who plays Frankenstein in the Monster Squad is the guy that plays the serial killer in Manhunter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go and watch that and get my education. Like, you guys are the experts, so I love that you're like you have so many of the facts about the movie. I also love that you said it's been like a decade since you've watched it, and I watch this movie probably yearly. It's one of my favorite movies. I feel like just in general, and I feel like looking at it through a more modern lens, I was like, wow, this movie is really feminist to me. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. And I'm like, why am I drawn to this movie, right? Maybe that's why, because throughout the movie, Clarice is being kind of sexualized by like everyone, her professors, Hannibal, maybe, Miggs, obviously. So there's all these moments, and she's such a strong female lead character. And I'm like, back in 1991, I mean, like, wasn't this groundbreaking? Like, maybe that's why it was so successful, but I don't think that's not why it's such a good movie, but that is part of it. Like, because it's a female cop or a female FBI agent, figuring this stuff out, despite all of this, like, disgusting stuff that's being targeted at her specifically, like the sexism in the FBI and things that were going on at that time.
And she earned her place in the room because she was a rookie. Yeah. She hadn't even graduated yet. It was because that she was adept at her job that they put her in that situation.
Yeah, because they don't really mention it. They don't really mention the fact that she's a girl. I mean, Hannibal kind of, when she first comes in, but it's like, that's why they picked her. I feel like that's why they were like, you're going to be able to get through to him in a different way. I don't know. I don't know if maybe you saw it through a different lens because it's been so long since you've seen it. And now it's like 2023 and we're in much more of like a sexism aware era that I was like, wow, this is like feminist, like putting this strong woman lead character in this movie. I was like, oh, that's probably why it's one of my favorite movies. It's probably why I relate and I'm drawn to this movie.
Yeah, I definitely noticed the feminist touch and some very intentional shots that I'd never noticed before. And I don't know if it's a post Me Too thing or if it's just me being older and more mature. And, I don't think I've seen this film since I've been married or had a daughter. I recognize a lot more about the female experience.
How she's being treated, how she's being treated and objectified by everyone in her life, even the superiors. Well, that guy was scum. Who's the guy who like runs the asylum?
Chilton.
Dr. Chilton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he Anthony Held is who played him. And I've never seen that man in any movie where he was not an asshole. Ever.
He's typecast.
Plays it so well. Yeah.
He's good at it.
He's like smarmy. He takes all the credit, like, you know, in the newspaper scene when the reporters come in. And of course, he drops the ball tremendously and he escapes and things like that. So, and when I was talking to Jay about like being on, I was like, I don't really do like slashers. You know, my band, the Nearly Deads, you know, everyone thinks, and the rest of the guys are really into like legit horror movies. Because I know there's nuanced nuances to the genres and subgenres and stuff like this, but I was thinking the same thing as I was watching it. I was like, I don't really know if this is a horror movie, but it is like scary to think about these people and about Hannibal Lecter and his presence, and and also like the victims were women, so that's another like feminist angle to the whole thing. Like she's needing to save these women, and they're being victimized because they're nice and they're kind and they're helpful.
And that's also the subtext that they named the film after is by saving these women, she's kind of saving herself, and she's saving that lamb she couldn't save as a child, right?
Yeah. So all deep meanings. That's why it's an Oscar winner, right? Like there's layers to it. So I think that's why I like it. And it's not like just a slasher, lots of gore and things like that. That stuff makes my stomach turn. And there's like none of that in this movie. There's some photographs of some gore, right? So if you like need that, and the bloated body they bring out and autopsy, which why are they autopsying it at the funeral home? Was it that woman's funeral? And then in the back, it was somebody else's funeral, and in the back they're doing a different autopsy.
It was the funeral for the dude whose head she found in a storage container.
Jar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that was Raspel's funeral. I think it was the girl's funeral. Raspel was dead for like 10 years.
But there was a guy. She went to a guy.
That's her father. She was regressing back to her father and going up to the casket at her father's funeral. Have y'all ever done an open casket funeral?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did it once, and it was so weird. Did y'all feel like that, or was it like normal experience for you?
Well, for me, growing up down here, like it was normal for me. Like that's all we ever had, unless something very unfortunate had happened where they just couldn't. But even like my grandmother who died 2 years ago was open casket, and it is weird. It's kind of an uneasy feeling, and it's kind of like, well, you want to see them one last time, but is that the way you want to see them? Like it is very strange, but it's not. It's something I'm numb to, just because everyone I've ever been to has been open casket.
Yeah, I think that's more of a Southern thing, because almost everyone I've been to, except for some where there was like a bad car wreck and they couldn't fix up the body well enough. And it's rough because those bodies always look more bloated and they're heavily made up and everything. It's just creepy.
Yeah. Sorry to like go there. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I've only been to one, and for me, I was like, I don't even want to go up to this. Like, I haven't been to that many funerals in general, which I guess I'm blessed to be able to say, or I just avoided it. Like, I remember when I was a kid and people dying, and like I'm like, I don't remember seeing that. But I just remember it making me feel uneasy. So kind of back to the film, so many elements make you feel uneasy, not necessarily like jump scare or like somebody's coming after you. And one of the most brilliant scenes I think in all cinematic history is Clarice being at the right house and the FBI being at the wrong house, and that you don't find out until he opens the door, and it's like, oh my gosh, she was right. But it wasn't like they didn't listen to her. Like, she's right, but nobody listened to her and they brushed her off because she was a woman. It was like these men were just going on their own intel and their own path and believing Hannibal. And she was like, no, he's not telling you the truth. Like the anagrams that she was able to figure out, the way that she's like, he's not really saying what you think he's saying, and how she was able to put those puzzle pieces together. And then you're like, oh no. when she's alone in the house with no backup, that was the queen, like, feminist moment for me, where you're just like, she's got this, she can handle it, and she's not even really that scared. And she figured it all out, like, literally by herself. So just that juxtaposition of the two scenes where they're like all these guys guns a-blazing and they're at the wrong house, probably in the wrong state, the whole thing, just because they didn't slow down and stop and think. I think that's a very telling point to the whole character of Clarice and things like that.
Yeah, and something I noticed in this outing of watching it that I never noticed before is they really went to great lengths to show you that she was not passing her field gun exams, right? That she was not quick on the draw. She wasn't passing that part naturally well. And to set that up for, oh, she's in here and she's blind in the last scene in the total dark, and this guy's got the goggles on and can see the night vision, and she still gets him in the end, so that's like an extra big win for her doing that.
Yeah, and that's like scary. So like that's the little horror aspect, and it's the very end of the movie. And you find it's like all this build up, and then you're like, oh no, she's there alone. Oh my God, what's she gonna do? And like, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that whole end sequence was pretty brilliant. This was an A24 film before A24, like with everything they did. And we'll go to John next, but I just want to say, we talk about the lack of it being horror, or how you could, same thing we did with Jaws, with another member of the band. You guys are just bringing these controversial films to us. But here's, to me, what makes it horror. Hannibal Lecter is a cannibal. He eats people.
Yeah, that's pretty gross.
Like, horror means horrific. Like, horror doesn't mean they're wearing a mask and they have a knife. Horror is just something that is horrific. And even in, we don't really see him do a lot of action, but he does those guards. He bites that one guy's face, like bites a chunk out of his face. Like, that's the horror part for me with this film. And of course the end, where she can't see, in the whole Buffalo Bill situation. But yeah, that's why I think this is considered horror, just because that it rhymes with his name. He's a cannibal, and that right there pushes it over that edge for me.
Yeah. Plus the scene where that he does eat the one guard's face, but then the other guard is like strung up on that cell. Like, that's pretty gruesome. And then he like switches faces with the guy and nobody notices. And then the whole ambulance, like, it's like the not seeing of the stuff. I think I'm a fan of that, like the illusion to like, oh, something horrific happened here and there's lots of blood, but you're not actually seeing it. That's very, I guess, Hitchcocky, like there's kind of a precedent for that kind of horror of like, you don't really see it, but just the thought of it is scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the shower scene in Psycho. You don't ever actually see very much. It's the implication and the insinuation of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the brilliance of it with this film. I hadn't seen this probably since 1991, 92. I saw it when I was young. I recently watched all of them. So I watched Manhunter, I watched Red Dragon, I watched this, I watched Hannibal. I didn't watch Hannibal Rising because I've seen that before.
Don't bother. It still sucks. I went back and watched it recently because I'm like, maybe I can appreciate it more now. No, it still sucks.
Yeah,
which one
it's
is Hannibal
so bad.
Rising? That's not the one with Julianne Moore, is it?
No, it's the one where Hannibal is like, it's a prequel of him during like after World War II, and his sister's killed, and it's like learns how to become who he is because he's like hunting down these like war criminals who killed his sister. So it's kind of weird.
He's Magneto. That's what Magneto does in X-Men.
And then you got Hannibal, and that's a whole other episode, honestly, that mess of a movie. My favorite is Manhunter for sure. I love Manhunter just because it's so realistic. Manhunter is kind of like, and you could tell Michael Mann when he made that movie, it's like, if this really happened, if Francis Dollarhide was a person, Will Graham, all these people, it's like, this is what it would be. It's kind of like subdued performances. They're acting, but they're not theatrical. But it's kind of what you're looking for, right? So a lot of people would say this is the best of the series, Silence of the Lambs. It's definitely up there. For me, it's like right below Manhunter, but it's a great film. Everything about this movie works, from the suspense, the buildup, everything you were saying about feminism. I noticed that the first shot I noticed it was when she was in Quantico getting in the elevator and all the guys are there.
That the elevator, she's so short and tiny and they're so big, and she's just like, well, I'm here. Yeah. I was like, oh gosh, she's in a boys club. And then the whole movie, and then when at the funeral home, all the guys are like, there's a shot where they're all looking at her and she's just kind of like, yeah, okay. And then Jack Crawford makes that comment like, hey, do you want to talk about this in here? There's a lady present. So it's like very subtle things. Yeah, but later when they leave in the cab, he says, I'm really sorry I said that. I'm trying to keep with the old boys club. And she goes, it matters what you say in front of them. Did you guys pick up on that? I was like,
right.
Yo, it's 1991. I was like, go girl. Yes, it does matter. If you're in a superior position and you're a male and he's her mentor and that relationship is beautiful. He's like, I know, I'm sorry. Like, so that's that thing where you're like, if you're a man and you don't perpetuate the stuff, fix it. Don't be like that. So I was like, that's really progressive for 1991. Good
now
job,
looking,
Silence of the Lambs.
Now looking through a more jaded lens, even though I've seen the movie a bunch of times, I was just waiting for Scott Glenn's character to kind of make the moves on Jodie Foster, because that's totally what you do, and totally betray that really pure relationship. So I'm glad they didn't do that.
You kind of could feel that back in that era, and unfortunately that was a thing. I mean, I never noticed that stuff as a kid, just because you don't really, I think as a kid you're feeling the atmosphere, you're feeling what you're seeing, but you don't understand everything else. The thing that immediately stood out to me when I watched it, and my wife noticed it and I noticed it, it's a nitpick. Jodie Foster's accent is horrible in this movie. It is so bad. Like, I love her character. I think she's a great actor. I love her performance, but there are times in this movie when she has such a twang. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, this is so obviously not a Southerner trying to do a Southern accent.
Oh, she's supposed to be from like West Virginia, right?
Well, she
Where
is.
Where is she from in the movie?
She's West Virginia.
That's
I think.
a kind of a high. I don't know. I have no idea.
No, I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, in ways she was good with it, but there were some times where she would say things like, there was one line that made me laugh so hard when she was in the funeral home and she's checking the body. She says, 3 piercings and glittery nails. She's from town. I was like, what? How, like, that's like such a funny line. Like, she's from town because she's got piercings. I'm like, what? But
and glitter nail polish. Not from around here.
That's what we say in Trousdale County. Trousdale County, they say around town, and Trousdale County is like a mile up the road. So,
yeah, I mean, and that's, I'm sure that is a thing. I just thought that was so, like, I don't know why that made me, and that moment is not funny, but I just laughed so hard because that was like such a random line to hear. But the movie really, the way it sets up, and she's jogging at the beginning, you follow her through Quantico. You see her going into Quantico, goes through, meets Jack Crawford. The way that sets up that world is brilliant. The way that you first see Hannibal, the thing that Jonathan Demme did so great was he zoomed in on Hannibal so much, every shot. And like you were talking about, he doesn't blink. And you immediately get like really up close on him. So it's like very uncomfortable every time. Buffalo Bill, Ted Levine, great actor. He's kind of an interesting character. It's not really scary. He's just creepy and strange. And it's weird. Like, there's a lot of things going on with him, and there's a lot of speculation about what his motivations are and who he thinks he is. And that voice is just so strange. Like, it's very gruffy and kind of strange the way he talks. And it's hard not to, I mean, unfortunately, due to the movies we've seen over the years, every time I see that well, the first thing I think now is, hey, it puts Joe Dirt in the hole. That's like the first thing that comes to my mind. Which I know it's like, you shouldn't think that, but that's all I could think is Joe Dirt. But yeah, I mean, the movie really does work. I think I think it's really fascinating. Y'all were talking about the guy's head in the jar. So this is kind of random, but I read about this. That's Benjamin Raspel. He's the guy. So he is the guy with the head in the jar, where he was in therapy. Hannibal was like his therapist. If you watch Red Dragon at the very beginning, Hannibal is at the opera house, or no, he was like the symphony. He's listening to them play, and he's watching, and he's like kind of listening to everybody, and he picks out the flutist, and he's kind of looking at him. He goes missing, right? That's Benjamin Raspel, the guy that went missing. Same guy. So it's kind of a weird connection to the two movies. Which that, oddly enough, that scene was in the book. They didn't put that in Manhunter, but I think they decided to do that in Red Dragon just to kind of fill out more like the book. And you were talking about how much you like Red Dragon. I can respect that, because Red Dragon is it's very theatrical, but it's very in line with the book. So there's a lot of things in there that I think you get more detail with some scenes. So it's definitely pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, not a lot of complaints about this movie. I mean, it's one of the best ever. I mean, the whole scene with the jail escape, that's just masterful. Like everything, like I was watching my wife watch this because she had never seen it. And she was kind of like watching it, and she was like, and so she didn't know what was going to happen. And when he sat up and pulled the thing off, she was like, holy shit. Like she did not see that coming. But, you know, and I mean, it's, of course, it's kind of absurd, right? Could you actually do that? It's a movie, right? But it's a brilliant scene in the way he does it, the way he gets away with it.
And how much time did he have? The two guards had to have been up there for like an hour. I mean, because he strung that guy up, cut the guy's face off, changed clothes, put the body on top of it. I mean, this. I mean, unless he was. Why was
there only two guards watching him? There's a couple little plot
armor.
Holes.
Yeah, I mean, they put the mask on him, roll him out in a gurney, and has all this stuff, and then where
he has a pen. He has a pen the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Where did he have it?
He got that from Chilton.
Yeah,
so
he dropped it because he was
like, yeah.
And then he's like, use mine. This was the first time I remember noticing that he took the pen.
And he was like, oh, my pen's not here. Yeah. And they set that up very early when they go to Clarice and say, no staples, no pens, no nothing. So like, as far as like setting that up, that's in like one of the first parts of the movie. And then you're like, oh, the pen. Where's the pen? And
is it not a piece from the pen? Because that's
it's like the inside of the pen.
Mm-hmm.
What isn't that what
he? Mouth.
Yeah, he had in his mouth to undo the shackles.
Maybe he swallowed it and like.
Yeah, that's
stretched it back up or something. Because that scene, it's like I don't know. What are they not checking his mouth? I don't know. Like any normal prisoner, but they do a really
check a cannibal's mouth,
right?
No.
Well, you know, Con Air. I don't know if Dave Chappelle's character was supposed to be a cannibal or not, but you know, they check his mouth and he has that string in his mouth, and the guy's like, oh, your breath smells like shit. And he says, he told me he loved me. I will never forget that line for as long as I live.
Yeah. The one thing too, I will say with the prison sequence, y'all are kind of talking about how like the pen and all. The thing about that, and I did wonder when they put him on the gurney and they're taking him out and they start hooking him up to shit and he starts like shaking and stuff. I'm pretty sure he's faking it, but a part of me watching that now thinks like, you know, he might have been reacting because they're hooking him up to all this stuff. And if he's not hurt, you know, like that's going to mess you up putting all that stuff in you. Right. So I was kind of like, that's kind of interesting. I don't know either way.
I think that was more of him trying to speed up the process of getting out. Because typically in that, as a nurse, typically in that situation, they're just hooking you up to fluids. So that's just normal saline. They're getting an IV started. They're not really giving him anything until they have checked him out in the ambulance. That's where most of the stuff is, or in their go bag. But yeah, I think that was more of him trying to speed up the process before they could figure out what was going on.
That makes more sense then.
And they say earlier in the film, which I finally caught this go round, that he like murdered a whole bunch of people and like ate ate their tongue out, and his heart rate, which was monitored, never got over 85. So he must have masterful, abilities over controlling his heart rate and his blood pressure, probably.
Yeah, that the one thing too with that scene, you don't notice it. It's just a small part, but George Romero's in that scene. He's walking back. So when all of the people put him in the cell, you see Roger Corman earlier.
Yeah.
They're all walking out of the Memphis Shelby County Courthouse. You see George Romero turn around just for like 3 seconds. So there's a lot of funny cameos in this movie. Chris Isaac, George Romero. The interesting thing too is I like that Jonathan Demme did his homework. Michael Mann with Manhunter modeled Dollarhide in the books, Francis Dollarhide from Manhunter, Red Dragon. He was kind of modeled after BTK. That was like the idea. For this, Buffalo Bill, the way he is in this movie, a lot of that is Ted Bundy. So like him holding the cast, being like kind of goofy, dropping the couch, that's all Ted Bundy 101, right? So there's a lot of real life inspiration with some of those things, unfortunately. But yeah, it's other than that, I mean, it's a terrific movie, right? Start to finish. It's scary. There's tension. Yeah, I love it. So definitely.
You mentioned BTK before I get into my review. That is my favorite serial killer catch of all the serial killers. Because he wants to send an email to the cops and they're like, don't trace this. And they're like, yeah, we totally aren't going to trace it. And then they traced it and caught him. So I thought that's one of the funniest ways that a serial killer's ever been caught. He was like, you're not going to, okay, perfect. And the cops were like, yeah, we're totally not going to look into that. So I'm gonna drop the one elephant in the room that nobody's talked about. For such a great film and all the awards and accolades it's got, its pop culture,
relevance,
status.
Yeah.
The title card and intro credits look like they were made with word art, like Microsoft Windows 95 Word.
It was 1991.
I just noticed that.
I noticed it too. I was like, this looks trash. Our standards are too high right now. It was 30 years ago or more.
Yeah. I just remember when it first popped up, I was like, did a 5-year-old do this? Did they run out of time with editing? And they're like, my son will take care of it. But other than that, this movie is phenomenal. Possibly one of the greatest acting jobs of all time, Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. From the moment he pops up on screen, he's under your skin. The way he talks, the way he delivers his lines, the subtlety, the intensity at times, the scene where Clarice is leaving, the guy spits on her, and then Hannibal starts screaming for her to come back. It's such a tense scene, and it's all created because of the atmosphere that Sir Anthony Hopkins has created with that character. And what's brilliant about it, he's not the main villain per se. The main villain's obviously Buffalo Bill, but he's the main character of the movie outside of Jodie Foster. But for all of the evil that he has does in the movie, and you know that he's going to continue to do, when he's following that director of the psychiatric hospital in the end, you're rooting for him, not the psychiatry director. Mm-hmm. You see him going, I'm going to have an old friend for dinner. And when you see him, you're like, oh, get him. Because that guy was so sleazy early on. So it's such a great job to create such an evil character that you don't hate. And you don't really hate Hannibal Lecter. You know he's evil, you know he's bad, but you're drawn to him. And that's just a testament to Sir Anthony Hopkins' acting ability. The movie, the pacing is so good. You know what the goal of the movie is. You know how it's going to get there. They do a good job of showing that even though Clarice is just an FBI student, basically, that she's very capable. And the trust that the FBI director or the person that's over her kind of has in her like you can tell that he kind of sees there's something in her. And yeah, for a little bit, he's kind of using her to get to Hannibal, or to get Hannibal to talk, because he feels like maybe there'll be something there, because she's a woman. But they show that, she's almost on his level of intelligence, especially the scene where she tells him your anagrams are showing, or however she phrased it, that she was picking up on things that other people weren't all the way up until the end. When she goes into Buffalo Bill's house, not knowing that that's him, but she starts getting that sense, like that gut feeling. And then she starts piecing it together by what she sees and realizes this is him. So they do, like you said, they did a great job of creating a strong female character, but she's not rude or arrogant. She's confident, she's capable, and she goes about her job the way she's supposed to go about her job. She's not in anybody's face. She's not yelling over people like you would expect from like a male character in that same situation. Not barging into rooms and taking control. She's just listening, absorbing, and putting all this puzzle piece together. The movie itself is whether you call it horror, suspense, whatever, is just a phenomenal film, regardless of what genre you want to put it in. The acting across the board is great. Yes, Jodie Foster's accent gets a little wild at times. But the back and forth, the way they have Anthony Hopkins almost breaking the fourth wall, like he's not talking to Clarice in most of the scenes, he's talking to us and pulling us into that movie. It's just so powerful. And this is a movie I've seen several times. And every time that I watch it, I'm drawn in again. And that, again, a testament to how great this movie is. You can watch it yearly. You can watch it again and again. It's definitely a movie that you would tell your friends, hey, have you seen Silence of the Lambs? You need to see Silence of the Lambs. There's not really anything bad other than, like I said, the title sequence, title credits. Other than that, it's just a great film. It's suspenseful. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. It doesn't really let you go until it's ready to let you go. The scene in the house at the end when all the lights go off, they paint towards that, like John said, with her shooting not being up to par. Buffalo Bill using the night vision goggles earlier in the film, so when the lights go out, you almost have a sense of dread yourself because you know what's going to happen, and then you hear that whoosh, the night vision goggles come on, and she's feeling around. She's trying to get a sense of where she's at. She's listening, and then when the gun cocks, and she just turns around, and the flashes of light. You don't see necessarily him dying, but you see the flashes of light as he's getting shot, and it's just such a beautiful visual for the ending of that film. So yeah, I absolutely love this movie. Great pick. Glad we got to review it. Can't really say anything else about it that hasn't already been said.
I'm glad that it's a movie you've seen before. That's a rare thing on this show. I have two corrections. BTK got caught by a floppy disk because he asked them if it can be traced.
Yeah, and they said no, we can't do that, and he was like, okay,
right. I thought you said he wrote a letter. I didn't hear you say floppy disk.
He emailed him from a computer at the church, and they traced the IP address to the church.
Okay.
That's a whole nother podcast, I feel.
Whole nother podcast.
Definitely. Yes.
I don't know a whole lot about BTK. He's one of the ones I don't know a lot about.
Didn't he go a really long time before getting caught? That's
he went dormant for a while, but they said that I can't remember who it was, but there was somebody writing a book about another serial killer. I think that's what it was, and it kind of got under his skin that people had forgot about him, so that's why he started killing again, because his ego got in the way.
They never caught the Zodiac killer.
Well, that we know of.
Somebody have y'all done Zodiac yet? Is that really horror?
We need to.
I mean, it says horror or Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, Zodiac's kind of a cool film, right?
David Fincher.
Definitely. Yeah. That movie rules.
Love David Fincher. Jodie Foster. Ding, ding, ding. David Fincher. They've done some stuff together. The Panic Room, a couple other maybe.
Oh, that's right.
They partnered together.
Room. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's Dwight Yoakam.
Dwight Yoakam's
terrifying in that movie.
Yeah.
He is such a
fantastic actor. He's a fantastic actor.
Well, he was also a terrible dude in Sling Blade too.
Yeah,
we ain't got no band, Randy.
he usually plays an asshole too. There's something else I've seen him in recently where he was the villain or in a role like that. You said the guy threw spit. I thought it was semen.
It was not spit. I was thinking that the whole time. I was like, that wasn't.
I thought he was him spitting on her face.
No, he was like jerking off, and then
he was full on nude in the bed doing that.
So
then that was an incredible shot because he was at least 8 feet away.
He had it in his hand.
Some power.
I mean, they're in jail. It's probably built up for a while. No, but that makes it even gross. Like when she leaves and she's like crying, I was like, I understand why. That is so disgusting. So talk about the worst that she's subjected to. That is like absolutely the worst. And then guess what Hannibal does? The romantic he is was like, that guy can't do that to my Clarice. And another line I just really want to mention that I love, because you mentioned how Hannibal is like, you're rooting for him at the end. In the very end, he's there. Clarice is like, no, he's not going to come after me because they know he's on the lam. I'm not worried about him. And he calls her and she's like, oh my God. And he's like, the world is much more interesting with you in it. I was like, oh, that's like if a man said that to me, I'd be, oh, that's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I mean, what a
It is like a strange, twisted, almost romance.
Mm-hmm.
They build on that in the Hannibal.
The sequel in Hannibal.
Yeah,
they really build on that.
The book is even worse. So
yeah,
the end of the book of Hannibal is like, I do not like it. It is so out there.
I've never read it. I don't even think I realized that these were based on books, which, shame on me, but
the best thing about Hannibal is he gets to feed a guy who's still alive his brain to him.
Yeah. That was the best part of that movie. It's a pretty good highlight. But yeah, they hone in on that, like almost like loving romantic attraction or something. I don't know what it is, but in the end of Hannibal, when he says that line to her, I'm like, oh man, that's why you are like, wow, you're rooting for him. He helped her. He cares about her for whatever reason.
I wonder if it's kind of more of a father-daughter thing because she tells him about what happened with her father. So maybe he has like a almost fatherly feeling towards her because she's probably not his intellectual equal, but she's up there. Like he recognizes her intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some weird pathological thing happening there.
Yeah.
But we all said we liked the movie. I think 5 Academy Awards tell you that it is a good film. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, Actress, and I think Screenplay was the 5th one. I mean, awards don't lie. But it's being the first film to actually win for it's a horror movie like that. That's groundbreaking in its own. I enjoy. I'm like you, John. I don't know that I've seen it. Well, I think you said 91. It hasn't been quite that long. I don't think I've seen it probably 15 years at least. And I've always owned it. It's always been on my shelf. It's always been a film that I really enjoy. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't have that rewatchability for me. Like once every 3 years, maybe. Like that's me. But I'm weird. But yeah, I can't really go any further than what everybody else said because we're all pretty right on the nose with it. So we'll move forward and kind of segue into our kills because mine involves Mr. Miggs himself, who fed the geese into his hand and then threw it on Clarice. Although we don't see that kill, we know what happens and we know why it happened. And
I thought you were going to say the small death that happened in order to make that scene happen.
What could he have possibly said to somebody through the cell that was that crazy to make them swallow their own tongue? Like that's disturbing.
That's
just
horrifying.
To even try to imagine what he could have said to him to make him be like, no, that's it, I'm out.
Right.
So
yeah, but that was my
I don't want to like interrupt your thought, but do you think that's what makes him likable? He seems in the film to kill or try people who are either bumbling, incompetent, or deserve it in a way.
Yeah,
Is that why we're rooting for him?
Even in the series with Mads, and I'll be honest, and it's controversial. Mads is my favorite Hannibal, hands down. It's Anthony Hopkins is perfect, but Hannibal is just a little bit better for me. And even that whole series, they show it was on CBS, and they showed very graphic deaths, and he made like temples and like teepees and stuff like out of skin and bodies. even though you saw that he's so charismatic, you're still kind of like, it's okay. Like I got you. I follow you. And it's just that character. I think it's written that way for a reason. It's not like when we watch Terrifier 2, we're not rooting for art. It's different. Like, yeah.
No,
so but
TJ's like, no.
His favorite.
I will never watch that movie. Oh no, me, TJ. Sorry, that TJ.
No, we made TJ watch it.
Neither one of us are watching it again.
It was one of the few 5 stars that he gave.
Oh, but
negative.
Man.
The kill we don't see Migs for being a dirty bastard. That's my favorite kill. Travis.
I'm trying to think of the kills. There's not a lot of actual on-screen kills. I mean, probably the thing that this most iconic to me is when he bites half of that dude's face off, one of the guards at the end when he's making his getaway. And then he's just beating him like to the classical music score in the background. He's just wailing away with the nightstick, and there's just something. And he's got the blood, and he's wearing the all white, so you see the blood trickling down. There's just an iconic thing about that. So that's probably for me.
TJ.
Oh gosh. Okay. Because you're right, they don't really show any of the kills. And I had one in mind, and I know it's like towards the end of the movie, so I think it has to do with those 2 cops. Yeah, I guess that one, the one that he strings up. I mean, that's just disturbing. That's just gross.
John.
Did anyone notice though that it kind of looks like the moth that's so prevalent, the way he strings him up like wings?
Yeah, death's head moth.
Yeah, definitely the 2 guards. The guy. So one of them, Charles Napier, is the guy that he beats to death. He's kind of most known as Murdoch in Rambo Part 2, but yeah, that's so brutal. Like you said, when he's like hitting him and he's like getting like almost like orgasmic as he's doing it. You can see it. One thing I did want to mention too, you were talking about Hannibal, sort of like his psyche and how he is, and like one line I always liked, and it's in Red Dragon and Manhunter, is when Will is talking to Hannibal, Will Graham, and Hannibal's like, so by proxy, you think you're as smart as me because you caught me. And Will's like, well, I have one up on you. And he's like, what's that? He's like, well, you're insane. And that's like one of the few times in the series where Hannibal just like looks at him, and you can tell it like really upsets him, because he even knows that like there's something wrong. There's something wrong with him that he can't comprehend. I just thought that was fascinating. But
I'm fairly certain they say that in the series.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I feel like he says that to him. Has no one else watched the series?
No.
It's been a while. I think I saw some of it.
Should we?
It's only 3 seasons. It was on CBS.
I mean, I like that actor. That was the actor in the remake of Casino Royale as the main bad guy, right?
Yeah, he
cries a lot.
And he's so good. And I've never seen anything where I'm like, they should have picked somebody else. He's fantastic and everything. But it's just a series, TJ. It's on Paramount, I believe. But Hugh Dancy plays. It's just called Hannibal. Yeah. Hugh Dancy plays Will Graham, and he's so great as Hugh Graham.
What's the premise?
He's Will Graham trying to catch Hannibal Lecter. So he's been committing these crimes, but they're not quite sure who he is yet. So he's kind of getting on to him. He thinks, no, I'm sorry. They use him at first, like they do in Silence of the Lambs, to help catch other serial killers. And then they kind of start putting the pieces together, realize Hannibal is also a serial killer.
Is it supposed to be like pre-Silence of the Lambs, or different timeline, different?
It's pre, but it's kind of like it's kind of like a loose retelling of like Manhunter and Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah,
like both, but
like is there a remake?
It's all him and Hugh.
There's I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out though. All right, Kellen, what was your favorite kill?
So y'all had me thinking, is Buffalo Bill the only kill they physically show? Like him beating the guard, you don't really see him doing it. You just kind of see the blood spray.
I think
the other guard, he just goes after. Is Buffalo Bill the only actual on-screen
I think
kill?
so.
He's very interesting for as graphic as some of the scenes are. I agree with TJ and John. The visual of the guard being strung up on the cage that he was in is just so graphic, and it's he bites the guy's face off. They tell you everything he's done, but until you see that, you don't really realize the depth of depravity that Hannibal has inside of him until you see that he's just strung up this guard that, for all intents and purposes, hasn't done anything to him, was even bringing him a second meal. But hey, this is my time to escape, so this is going to be your end. So just such a strong visual to really send home how evil Hannibal really is.
Yeah. I think they did that because they probably had tests on. It's like, that Hannibal, he's a swell guy. And like, we got to do something. We got to fix that. So, all right. So we'll go around with the rankings. We'll close up shop. I gave this a 4.5. And the only reason I didn't give it a perfect score is just because that rewatchability for me personally, like, it's just not something I frequent back to. I love it. I respect it. But I gave it a 4.5. Travis?
I think I got to give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's earned that. And I have probably rewatched it more than Jay over the years, even though it's been an extended break since I have seen it. I did watch it a lot in my teens and 20s. And I'm glad I might rewatch it, more frequently going forwards, because I picked up now, pushing 40 now, I pick up on a lot more than I think I ever got from previous watches now. So I'm curious to see how different layers might unfold with that going forward.
Yeah. All right, TJ?
I mean, I give it a 5 out of 5.
As you should.
No surprise. It's spooky season. We got the chill in the air. Let's watch a scary movie tonight. There's like maybe 5 that I go to every year. This is 100% one of them.
Now you got to say what your other 4 are. You can't just leave that dangling.
Okay. Silence of the Lambs, Hocus Pocus. Don't make fun of me. I
watched that too.
Original Halloween. Probably Jaws, and then The Shining. 100%. Always. Every year.
That's a solid list.
Yeah.
All right, John.
4 out of 5. I'll take off 1 point for her accent and the terrible font at the opening and closing. Like Ellen said. So,
it is really bad.
I could also say I took off some because she threatened to hurt little Precious down in the pit. Like, Precious didn't do anything. Like, come on. Mm-hmm. All right, Kellen.
I'm gonna go with Jay. I think 4.5 is fair. It's such a solid film from start to finish. We talk about it just about every week. You can nitpick movies all you want, but I mean, as far as just a complete film, this is one of them, and it deserves a really high rating.
Yeah. All right, that's going to put us at 4.4. We'll call it 4.5 because, again, 5 Oscar wins, so you got to respect that. All right, that's going to be it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to wherever you listen to this podcast, follow us on Instagram, and come join the church Horror Sanctum on Facebook. Come back next week. We're going to be talking to Nathan Gray and Becky Fontaine from the Iron Roses. You may also know Nathan Gray from Boy Sets Fire if you're my age, who's a fantastic punk band. They'll be with us, and we'll be talking about the original Blair Witch. Oh, and if you look at you got to speak, Kellen. Kellen, you got to speak.
I'm speaking. I'm speaking right next to this beautiful vinyl that is also signed that I got at the Country in Nashville, or whatever it's called now.
The local
years ago.
Yeah. Years and years ago. All right. So that's going to be it. TJ, thanks for taking some time. You want to take a second to tell everybody about the Nearly Deads and where they can find your music and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, check out the Nearly Deads. TheNearlyDeads.com is a good hub. We're on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. If you just Google us, you'll find us. YouTube channel. We just released a new record called We Are the Nearly Dead. So please take a listen to that. It is streaming now everywhere. This was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And it gave us a chance to rewatch a movie some of us haven't seen in a very long time. So, all right, that's going to do it for this episode. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and TJ. And until next time,
keep it spooky.